to What's the Tea, a conversation series about relevant topics in our community. For Press House staff, Niato Abrahams, that's me, Becca Bedell, Erica Liu, and Ginger Morgan sit down for 30 unscripted minutes to discuss current events, social and political issues, and more. Not as experts, but as human beings dedicated to dialogue. Today, our topic is the shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin. But before we dive into our conversation, we're going to start with our ritual that we do each week and have everyone share what they're drinking.
It's a little boring for me this week. I just got a glass of water because I've had enough coffee for today.
I am in the same boat. I'm drinking out of a bottle, but it is still just water.
Also just water, which I was told last week would be my thing. But I am repping a water bottle with Get More stickers and always relevant. This is just the tap water bottle I keep at work.
And I am drinking my second cup of coffee because it's just that kind of day, and we'll be joining everybody from the road.
Yeah, and for those of y'all who are tuning in, you may hear some ringing in the background as Ginger is talking. The air conditioner is running in the car so that she doesn't overheat on her road trip. So that's pretty important. Before we jump in, we wanted to take some time to give some information on what happened to Jacob Blake and some updates on his condition and the state of things in Kenosha. So if you're not already aware, on Sunday evening, Jacob Blake, who is a Black man and resident of Kenosha, Wisconsin, was shot in the back at least 7 times from point blank range by a Kenosha police officer. Recent updates from his family have informed us that he is potentially paralyzed from the waist down and is in critical but stable condition. There have been a number of protests in Kenosha as well as in Madison and in other cities around the country. And last night, protests in Kenosha escalated. There were armed citizens who attended the protest as counter-protesters, and one of them shot and killed 2 people and injured a third. So things have been a little difficult and taken a dark turn. We wanted to take just a minute or so to honor Jacob, to offer prayers, well wishes, thoughts, and to hold him in the light. And so we're going to share a picture of him and hold space for silence, for prayer, and for healing. We hope that and pray that Jacob's healing continues, that justice can be found. So now, turning toward our conversation for this week, to start things off, thought we would just kind of share maybe our initial reactions when we heard the news and now where we are sitting emotionally with what's happened to Mr. Blake.
When I heard the news, I believe it was Monday morning, and my initial reaction, I think, was just this internal feeling of not again. And there's complex layers to that I want to name around my role as a relatively privileged white person, but someone who considers myself pretty tuned into the Black Lives Matter movement, balancing the very real just frustration and exhaustion with this going on, while also recognizing like my exhaustion is not really the exhaustion that matters. And so I'm just like sitting with that, like, what does it mean for white people to get exhausted with racial injustice when we're not really the ones on the receiving end of that cruelty? But yeah, really just mourning that violence continues, like that these police officers, whatever was compelling them, felt like they had the ability to shoot a man 7 or 8 times from point blank range in the back right now, like at any point in history, but right now, coming out of a summer of sustained protests about police shootings of Black people. It baffles the mind, and I am sitting with the pain around that, and also just I feel like there's so much misunderstanding from all angles. And as a communicator, I want to sift through that, but it's a lot. And lastly, like just a moment ago, sitting as we were just looking at the pictures of Jacob, there's something about looking at a person's face that just really like brings home the humanity of like, this could have been one of my best friends that I know. Like this could have been any one of my close friends. So it's a lot.
I'm having a hard time putting into words. I feel a jumble of things. I think I saw it Sunday night, and my go-to reaction was to shut it down. One of my rules is I try not to check the news after 9 because I don't sleep well anyway, but generally that doesn't help. But my reaction was I saw it and I shut it down, and I kind of went numb because I felt like I needed to just, I didn't know in that moment what I could do. And the next day, I think I still, and even now maybe I feel to degrees numb. And when I glimpse down into it, if I'm being really honest, I feel such rage. Rage that is very, if I showed anybody, is I think scary. And so I tamp it back down. And I move towards the work I think that we've been trying to do and continue to do. But when I think about his kids and the car, yeah, I don't really have any words. That's where I am.
So I heard the news on Sunday night. It's our habit to watch the 10 o'clock news, and I had a very similar reaction of just like, I can't more and more of these stories. And the other thing that I'm remembering now, which I think because I am ashamed of it and pushed down, the first thing I heard about the shooting was that police had shot a man responding to a domestic call. And my mind fills in stories, like fills in what I think happened, right? So my first thought was that it was a domestic violence situation in which a man was responsible for perpetrating violence against a woman, because that is a familiar theme also in violence in our Monday. The domestic call, as I understand it now, involved two women fighting and Jacob trying to intervene and break up that fight. At least that's one account I've heard of what happened. And so I'm sort of left with all the ways my mind makes assumptions and fills in explanations to try and make sense of something that doesn't really make sense. And I avoided watching the video of the shooting, which I do, because once those images get in my mind, I can't get them out. And I have since seen the video, and there's just no, the only thing that comes to mind is when you have a gun in your hand, you're set up to shoot someone. Like your fingers on a trigger, you're pointing a gun. What do people think is going to happen? And that's not an excuse for the police. It's really my question about how police are trained and deployed and why we pull guns on situations. And I don't have good answers, and I want to get, I just find myself impatient for solutions that aren't coming. So that's where I am.
Yeah, I think a common thread throughout all of sort of our initial responses is like this instinct to like kind of push it away, in that it like there's a fatigue that has set in over the past several months, with just like constantly being confronted with Black death. And I know for myself, like I've been in this place since the death of Ahmaud Arbery several months ago, where I don't, it's almost an instantaneous reaction. Like if I see a name in a hashtag, I'm like, phone off, closed, app, done. I can't do this. And in this case in particular, I saw the news on Monday morning, and it was accompanied with a video. And my first reaction was, interestingly, like not even anger at what happened, but anger at the person who shared the video. Because I was like, why are you sharing this again? What is this sort of obsession we have with parading these videos around of people being shot in the street? And since then, like, I don't really know if that anger has gone. I'm like actually kind of feeling it right now, sort of bubbling back up to the surface. And it is coupled with anger at how things have escalated in Kenosha. And there are some like further details of like what we might talk about later, depending on where our conversation goes. But I also catch myself forgetting, like, Jacob Blake is alive. And that is, is this like the first time in my mind, in all of the sort of high profile encounters between Black people and police, where police have inflicted violence on a Black person, that person is alive. And like, potentially expected to live. And that is, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with that fact. Exciting is the wrong word, but there is something generative there that I think is sitting alongside the anger.
I've seen
It feels like
sorry.
Go ahead.
I've seen the valuable point being made that like the shooters, the policemen, did not intend him to live. Like in acts like this, like death is the intended outcome. And so the fact that he's alive is in some like small way, like it's like you can't go so far as to call it hopeful in the grand scheme of things maybe, but it's this silver lining of just like the outcome was not what was intended. Yeah, I'm also just like sitting with that, and then of course the conversations that are happening around his probable paralysis, and I think there's a lot of tricky talk that comes up around paralysis and around disability, and our culture has a lot of narratives where disability is seen as like a fate worse than death, and I think we really need to be conscious of not falling into that assumption or that language trap here. You were gonna jump in, Ginger?
I was just gonna say that that his survival feels like a small window of grace in an otherwise horrifying set of circumstances. One of the other things I guess I've been thinking a lot about is my journey as a person raised in a rural, predominantly white community with very few people of color, becoming aware of pervasive racism that's part of our society and how it shaped me in ways that I wasn't aware of, and how did I begin to take steps to hear stories in the media and interrogate them in a different way to try and part of it is the dehumanization, right? It's a sense that people we don't know, who we can say are different than us, living a different life, doing different things, or so we believe, that, and we make up stories, as I did when I heard the account of what we think can account for something like that happening, right? And to begin to say, you know, I mean, I think there were several things that began to happen in my own life. Friendships, I think, where I had to imagine people I knew and not a stranger, who could be vulnerable to that kind of police violence and force that as a white person I would never expect to be on the receiving end of. One of the things I thought about is, you know, I grew up in a small, it seemed like an idyllic sort of rural town where police were your friends. They helped you. They kept the bad guys away, right? But how we construct in our minds who the bad guys are. And the other kind of formative experience was working in an urban area with mental health response and watching police operate and realizing very, very quickly that police do not deal well with people not following exactly and doing exactly what they say. And when you don't do exactly what they say, they very quickly use force to subdue situations. And there were, in my experience, very quickly, police that I came to trust that would de-escalate situations, and police that I recognized would use force very quickly. And, you know, beginning to sort out how do we as citizens take some accountability and responsibility for how police are trained and what they do, and you know, that citizens are subjected to mortal violence without cause. That's why I said I keep getting back to we've got to, I don't know, we've got to find a way for this to stop. But it's a whole system we have across the whole country and in different communities that each police their own police, right? So I feel so overwhelmed where to start.
The news that's coming out just in this today is about the additional shootings that now have happened in Kenosha by a young white man, appears to be just 17 years old, who was walking around with the AR-15 and, you know, was recognized by the police, talking to the police before the shooting happened, and shot and killed 2 people and injured at least 1 more, if not more than that, I think, and then drove home. Has since been arrested. But, you know, in all of this, the fact that, you know, as a person of faith, as a person who follows Jesus, and for, you know, people a lot talk about what Christian faith does, and I just am at a loss, because to me it seems like, how can anyone feel like they have like the power to hold a gun, to, you know, because holding a gun means that you feel like you are capable of taking a life, because that's what guns are for. They're used to take life, and the weight of that responsibility that you know, that we've armed the people who are supposed to protect us, that we give them these weapons. That's our
5 minute,
timer.
the 5-minute timer.
5-minute timer. So I will.
Well, we did start a minute or 2 after 3, so we have until 3:32.
I guess what I'll say is that, you know, so some of my thoughts on this has been about, what are we doing when we, you know, like Ginger said, you know, like if you, the purpose of having a gun is to have power over somebody, forceful power. And that, you know, have we examined that we as a society and as people and as fellow citizens, and like, you know, that we would want to have, like, I personally wouldn't mind if everyone who owns a gun had to have like an ID, because I'd want to know that you feel like you have that kind of power and that you're willing to use it, because it would tell me something about how I need to move far away, because I'm scared. I would not trust myself with that kind of power. I think in the heat of the moment, when we're, you know, upset or scared, people act on instinct, which is to kind of kill or be killed. And so I'm just, you know, what happened last night in Kenosha, it just is this perpetuation of it, you know, that I don't have a coherent thought here, but I just feel like, yeah, you know, this love affair that we have with guns.
Yeah, I think, trying to think of, I don't know, how to not open a giant can of worms, since we're heading towards the end of our time. But I think that sort of fascination with power and the ability to like determine who can live and who cannot, and how that is tied up to the police and like guns and gun control, all sort of, I don't know, bubbles to the surface in this specific scenario in ways that are like really, really tough to swallow. Like for the police to feel like the best path forward to respond to someone who is breaking up a fight is to then take that person's life. And like, I think what you're saying about like the power to take life is really important there, because like one shot would be enough to stop someone who's opening their car door, as Jacob Blake was doing. But like 7, 8, that's something is distorted in our imaginations about like people and the power that people have over one another for it to get to that point. And then again, like with what happened in Kenosha, like for a citizen to show up alongside the police and to cooperate with the police strictly because he has a gun, like that gun grants him power to now become someone who, like the police, can take a life, even though he's not earned that. And, you know, I don't think anyone should be able to earn that anyway, but how we break that sort of power that exists, I don't know what it'll take.
Right, and I have to say, you know, the piece that we can't miss is white people with guns, the tolerance for white people with guns, because it isn't the same. It's not the same if a black man had shown up at that protest with an AK-47. The response would not have been the same. You know, Dylan Roof murders people in a church, and he gets peacefully escorted to a car, taken to jail, and they buy him Burger King. A man who breaks up a domestic dispute does not want to stop for the police, tries to avoid the police, walks to his car, and he is shot. There's a difference in our imagination is not just about guns, it's about skin color. And I think it is on full display for our country to reckon with in this moment.
Yeah, and it's this obsession with taking a life, and it's an obsession with taking the justice system out of the justice system and putting it into individual people's hands, because something that like when folks look immediately to a justification of like, oh well, he might have had a knife, or he might have been reaching for a gun in his car, they're missing the fact that even if Jacob Blake had a gun and intended to use it on police, even in that worst scenario, he deserves a trial. The police are not the executioners. And that just, I think this whole concept of justice is being thrown into these extreme, dire circumstances where each individual is handed this power to take a life. And I think we just need to examine the really deep pain at the root of that.
Well, it's hard to stop here with sort of the feelings and the threads of conversation that are hanging in the air. But we are at the end of our time for conversation. And so first, we would say thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching. We also want to say that if you feel like you need someone to process through this incident with, if there are emotions or feelings or thoughts that are coming up for you and you need a conversation partner, someone to hold space for you, someone to talk or pray with you, all of us are available and happy to do so. All of our contact information is available on the Press House website, and you can find us there and reach out to us, and we'd love to connect with you. Thank you all for our time this week, and until next time, stay safe.